And we're in. How you doing today, David?
Hey, Brian. Great. How are you?
I'm amazing, and I'm so glad we got you in the studio. We've been talking about this for months, and it finally happened.
Yeah, I'm all excited.
So, look, I mean, how you been? I mean, being in LA the last couple months has been tough with all the
Rough.
fires and stuff.
Fires and, just all the things that are going on. Then I heard that there's this uproar about a treehouse. They tore down a treehouse someplace in LA, and people were so upset. I mean, why would they make such a big deal of over a treehouse? The local police, I guess they got a complaint from a neighbor. It had been in existence for 20, 25 years,
Hmm.
and the local community, they loved it, and that they all the terrible things are going on, and they picked a treehouse to go after. So, oh well.
Doesn't that just seem like such a distraction from like the real issues?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank God for local news.
Yeah.
So look, we're gonna get into your book,
Yeah.
from cab driver to Carnegie Hall, obviously. But it's always great to understand the origin story of where you've come from and how we got to where we are today. So where were you from originally?
Well, actually, we just drove by UCLA, and I remember when I was a kid, very young kid, my dad was going to school at UCLA. We were living on Gailey Street, married student housing, and I guess I used to roll down the hills in in UCLA, and now it's quite different. So that was my first home, and then my dad was became a high school band director, and so his job, he got a job at Canoga Park High School in the West Valley, and so we moved to Woodland Hills for a year, and then but Canoga Park was really where I grew up until I was about 18 before I went off to school.
Amazing. So you're born and raised in Los Angeles. Yeah. Well, you're one of the few people I've chatted with who is actually born here and still chooses to live here.
Oh, well, I wouldn't wanna live anywhere else. I spent most of my life, in and around, Philadelphia, New York, mostly,
Hmm.
a couple of years in Europe. Um, when I would meet people, in New York and then told them I was from Southern California, they said, "Nah, nobody's from Southern California,"
Yeah.
because we all go to school and maybe there, and then we go home, but
No one leaves Southern California.
right, exactly, exactly, right.
So, okay, so you grew up, your dad was teaching at UCLA, so you kind of grew up on
Yeah,
campus?
he was actually going to school
Oh,
at UCLA.
okay.
He got a GI Bill to go to school, and my mom got a GI Bill. She was in the WACs, they called them. She played in a string quartet that entertained the troops. So
Oh,
she got a GI Bill, and that got us our house in Canoga Park. And so there we are. So
so just for anyone who's watching who's not in the United States or understanding this, so the GI Bill is that you join the army and you serve,
right,
and then when you come out of the army, then they pay for your education.
that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's amazing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's.
Do they still do that?
Sir, I have no idea.
Yeah.
I wasn't called, so
I should have asked Michael the other day.
my number was too high. So when they were doing numbers,
Right. So your parents came and fought and then or
sure,
enlisted,
yeah.
yeah, and then that kind of set up your whole life afterwards.
Yeah, in a way, from the beginning. I mean, when I was 12, my dad took a sabbatical. So in those days, I'm not even sure if it's still true today, but a teacher could take, after 7 years of teaching, they could take a year off with half pay. And so obviously we didn't have a lot of money, but we rented out our house. And I'm sure my parents saved a lot of their money before. And we spent a whole year in Europe. And that completely changed my life. That's when my dad had been playing for 2 years the clarinet. I
Mm,
started when I was 10, and that's a story as well
mm,
over a girl. But he called up the principal clarinetist of the Vienna Philharmonic, one of the great orchestras in the world. My boy plays the clarinet. I had just won a competition at Sunnybray Elementary School in Canoga Park, and he calls up the principal clarinetist and, "Oh, my boy plays the clarinet." So at the time, the Vienna Philharmonic didn't make a lot of money.
mhm.
So this guy who was a very much revered musician, professor, clarinetist in Vienna said, "Come on over, play for me." And so I did, and he took me on as a student, and that was the beginning of amazing experiences. He invited me to sit next to him in the Vienna Philharmonic during opera season, where I was able to see the greatest singers and sets and design and acting and all of it coming to life right in front of me. And
And you were
so
10?
I was 12.
Oh, wow.
And so that whole year we spent living in Vienna. We were in Bnei Brak, Israel,
Mhm.
um, where I got my bar mitzvah, a very Orthodox town where they chain the streets closed. That's what I was saying to you before, that I've lived maybe in almost as many places as you have. I've been around twice as long, but,
Right.
you know, anyway.
That's amazing. So your father was going to school at UCLA. You kind of grew up there on campus.
Yeah.
So where were your parents from originally?
That's the story too. My dad is from Transylvania, that area of Eastern Europe between Hungary and Romania that kept changing borders depending on who was in power.
Hmm.
So 1924, his dad, my grandfather, left Transylvania, came to the United States, immigrated here, went to New York, got a job, and got a place. Took him 9 years. Sent for the family in 1933, just when Hitler was coming to power,
Hmm.
just in time. I have a picture of my family and distant family from 1933. My dad is a little boy with a hula hoop. He was stuttering. He was so shy. He grew up with his two domineering sisters and mother while his dad was gone. Came to this country, and a decade later, he was awarded the Bronze Star at the Battle of the Bulge in the Second World War. So,
Wow.
quite a story. My mom also had a tough time. She was from Kiev, Ukraine,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
and her father decided he didn't want to be in the Russian army anymore. It was a 20-year hitch if you get into the Russian army in
Hmm.
those days. I don't know what it is now. They came to the United States, came to California, with my grandfather's brothers. They bought some land, but then the Ku Klux Klan burnt some crosses on near their house. They decided to go back to Cleveland. He ended up as a painter. He had this artistic flair. He played the flute. Maybe that's where I got some of my talent from. Um, he played the anyway, he ended up as a painter. He said, "I'm a painter." Well, he painted prisons. He worked for the city, and that's what he did for his life. But they moved so often. They had such a hard time. My uncle, who ended up doing very, very well in business in Southern California, he said that they moved so often because it was easier than paying the rent. They just had to move from place to place. So they had a very hard time. So both of my parents individually had a very hard time,
Hmm.
probably endured some abuse. And abuse is a theme in one of my chapters that I had to endure. So that was part of my story as well.
And where did they meet eventually?
My parents,
Yeah.
in LA, my dad was in New York, came to he came to LA, and with his buddy. I have a picture of them on a motorcycle from probably, I don't know, 1942 or something like that. I forgot to bring it for you. But anyway, they met. My dad went to a nightclub. My mom was playing the violin in a nightclub,
Mhm.
and he noticed her, and that's where they met.
Wow. That's kind of amazing that they've been all around the world
Yeah.
and somehow met like in LA.
Yeah. Right. Well, that's, pretty sophisticated city. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Not bad. So you were born here. You grew up here. So like how early were you when the whole music thing kicked off? Like was it your mom playing with you or like teaching you how to like how did you choose which instrument you wanted to play?
Well, that's it. Those are all great questions. My parents had friends who played instruments, and they come over at night after dinner, and they would play Mozart and Beethoven and Brahms into the night. I would sit under the piano as a little boy. I was probably 7, 8 years old, and listening to them moving around and enjoying themselves, laughing, playing music together.
That was like your Tuesday night?
That was like whatever. Yeah,
That's
it
incredible.
was amazing.
Yeah.
It was beautiful.
No one does that anymore.
Yeah. Right.
No one goes over like people don't get
Right.
together anymore and just
Right.
play music because they love it. Like
That's yeah, more it happens more often than you think. Professionals don't really do that. But now that I'm a little bit retired from professional playing,
mhm.
we get together. I go and play for people who are ill or sometimes having a problems, and I'll play for them. But that happens more often than you think. The payoff is beer at the end. Drinking beer together and all that kind of stuff.
That's beautiful. So there you are, you're like 4, 5, 6 years old, and all of your parents' friends are just coming over and they're just jamming and playing classical music in the
Classical
evenings.
music. Yeah.
That's so beautiful.
It was great.
Yeah.
But, had a crush on a girl. I don't remember what grade I was in. I was about 10, and Amory Rocky, beautiful I don't know. Anyway, she was gonna enter a talent show at school, Sunny Bray Elementary School, and I came home and, told my dad, "I wanna join I'm gonna be in a talent show." He
Mhm.
said, "But David, you don't know how to do anything."
You have no talent.
Nothing. And later he told me, "You better continue playing the clarinet because you can't do anything else." So, well, he was not, so supportive, but he created a lot of wonderful things for me. Anyway, I entered it, he would bring home instruments, the violin, the trumpet, finally, the clarinet made a lot of sense, seemed to me that, a wooden tube, one hand over the other. I learned a song called "Long, Long Ago," which was what it was. I played it and, beat her, and she never wanted to speak with me after that.
Oh, well, you
So
stole her thunder.
yeah, there you go. See? Yeah.
So 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 at that stage, you had kind of focused in on the clarinet, and was that your first performance in front of a
Yeah.
crowd?
Yeah.
Wow,
Absolutely.
and you won.
Yeah, I won. Yeah. I had plenty of losses later, but, it ended up okay.
So your parents are bringing home musical instruments, you're trying the violin, and something sticks with the clarinet, and it just made sense to you. I mean, how many instruments did you go through before you hit the clarinet?
I remember the cello, I remember the trumpet. When you play a trumpet, you ever play the trumpet?
No, I have no musical talent at all.
You just have to buzz your lips and all that kind of stuff, and I couldn't. You can hear I can't do it.
Yeah.
So the flute,
Mhm.
that's ridiculous too. I can't do that.
I think I played the recorder in high school.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
that's easy. That's instant gratification. Yeah, that's good.
That's what I needed at that time in my life. No, but I always equate, like, I don't know if I do this correctly or incorrectly, but I always put, like, people into 2 groups, like, 2 camps. It's either this was me growing up in Canada. It's either you played sports or you were a musician. Like, there was no middle ground. Like, all my friends played hockey, I played basketball, and then there were my friends that played the piano, the clarinet, the violin
Wow.
or whatever, or the drums or the guitar, but there was never a crossover between our like, these groups of friends
They
I
didn't do
had.
both.
No, and I couldn't do both. Like, I think it's, like, the great regret of my life is not learning how to play a musical instrument when I was young, and really kind of having that as part of my life because I think playing music is a dream come true.
Can I tell you a quick story?
This is what this is all
Yeah,
about. Take as long as you want.
so fast forward ahead decades, I'm playing with my group Orpheus Chamber Orchestra. We had many concerts every year in Carnegie Hall. After one concert, we were having a party upstairs in Carnegie Hall. The very top floor is like a museum. They have Leonard Bernstein's baton, and they have the Beatles who had performed there, all kinds of stuff. So I had a lot to play that night, and people were kind of lined up to talk with me afterwards. And I see at the end of the line, this guy looks so familiar. I'm and as he gets closer, I realize who it is. I'm all excited. I wanted to get them to move on. I said, "Hello, thank you very much. Hello, thank you very much. Hello," and then finally shaking hands with him. I'll tell you who it is in a second. Somebody else came. They were upset because I was spending like 5 minutes, 6 minutes with this guy. They said, "Well, what do you do?" And he was very humble. He looks down and he said, I said, "Well," they said, "What's your name?" And he said, "My name is," they're looking down, literally. "My name is Bernie Williams, and I play center field for the New York Yankees." And they said, "Oh, well, that's nice." And then they went back and talked with me. And so they walked away, and I hit him, and I said, "I'm a bigger star than you,
Yeah.
tonight." So I was making probably $12,000 that year, and he was making 12,000,000. But
Bernie Williams.
so humble.
Yeah.
Bernie Williams he was a big star in New York.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love how these athletes are very shy sometimes in the public eye, like how they just kind of aren't very
Yeah.
comfortable expressing themselves, and yeah.
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 That's beautiful though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you ever see Green Book?
No.
It was with oh my god, who are the actors in it? Anyways, they won an Oscar.
Wow.
The lead character, I believe, he won an Oscar, but it was all about a Carnegie Hall musician, and he actually lived on that top, like it was like a storage area, but he converted into apartment. I don't know how much of the story was true, but anyways, he was African American, and then they hired this driver
Oh,
to drive him.
the African American, and he went up throughout the South. He was a pianist.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Course,
So there was a whole movie about his driver, and they had a green book, and the green book was the only places that African American people could sleep and eat in the South. Yeah,
Wonderful.
I was just Carnegie Hall.
Great.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I've never been inside Carnegie Hall for a performance.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, it's sort of a mecca for musician, classical. Well, actually, George Gershwin, a lot of great Ella Fitzgerald, Count Basie, a lot of them played there. And the green room where the musicians sit before going out, there are pictures of people. Teddy Roosevelt gave a speech there.
Yeah.
Um, it's a historic,
Yeah.
place. Yeah,
The corner 57 and 7 forever.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Not bad. Okay, so let's back up a bit. So you won your first talent contest
Yeah,
playing the clarinet when you were like 10 and you beat
yeah.
this girl that you had a crush on and that was the end of that relationship.
That would. Well, later we connected later on.
Okay. It's so funny, but it's good. So then what? Like then you're in elementary school and high school and you're still playing the clarinet and you're still in like did you go to like a special music school or were you just in a regular like public school?
Well, we took this year from August 1st, 1961 to August 1st, 1962, and we drove across the country, took a ship across the Atlantic, Paris, bought a car in Paris, Spain, Italy, Vienna. We were in Vienna for many months, and that's where I got to study and have these incredible experiences with my music. So that was when I was 12.
That sounds way better than going to school.
That went way back, and we didn't. That's right, we didn't go to school. Yeah. So we came back August 1st, 1962. And I was more into music then than I was before. It was different. Before I still was playing. My sport was baseball. I love baseball. In fact, one summer, I was invited to a kind of training camp with the Baltimore Orioles. But music was more the reason I got away from baseball as a kid.
What position did you
I
play?
was a pitcher.
Okay.
And sometimes I played first base. I told my dad, I confided in him, I said, if it's a tense moment in the game, in the latter innings, and I'm in the field, it's a close game, and I used to pray out there, out in my uniform. I used to pray to God that the ball would not be hit to me. Didn't want to, didn't want, or if it was time to get up and it was the bases loaded and we're behind, we had to have a good. Please have something happen. I don't want to. So my dad said, "Nah, I don't think baseball's for you."
Yeah.
So
I had some little league moments like
did
that. Yeah, yeah.
did you also feel like that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because like sometimes the pressure would just be like too much, like too much for an 8-year-old kid, right?
Right. That's right.
And there's always one parent in the crowd who thinks it's like the National League Championship.
No,
Yeah,
no. So then it makes things so much worse.
it
Makes so
can.
much worse.
But I loved basketball. I got into basketball when I was like 7 or 8, and then I carried that all the way through to 22 and played in college and stuff like that.
Played in
So
college. What
yeah,
college?
University of Toronto.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so from Canada originally, but yeah, played at the University of Toronto. Loved it, but that was like my whole life. Like there was no hobbies. There was no other. I just couldn't do
In
anything else.
college. That
Yeah,
was. Oh, wow.
because you play like it takes up like 6 or 8 hours a day of your life.
You must have. Did you want to go pro?
Yeah, I guess in the early days of university, I had ambitions for that, and then as I kind of got towards the end of my career, the options limited to the point where I couldn't continue playing either professionally or for the national team, and then that's when I moved to China.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Unbelievable.
yeah, that was a wild ride.
Unbelievable. 3 months or something you were there, and then you were there for years.
Yeah, you know more about me than me.
Well, I'm fascinated, and even your shower curtain is the world. You've got the whole world in every room here.
Try. It's good because you can, I think it inspires you when you see a map or inspires you when you have this idea of traveling and things like that. And just to go back, like, how much weight do you put on that 1 year sabbatical that your parents took you to Europe? Because it almost seems like without that, this love of music, it might have been there, but it never would have
Not
blossomed.
the same.
Yeah.
Not the same. It absolutely. I mean, just seeing. Yeah, I'm just thinking about the operas. I mean, the stories. Even as a 12-year-old. I mean, I saw La Boheme where Mimi, this beautiful but kind of slight woman, uh, she gets sick and she ends up dying. She's in love with Rudolfo, and they're going to be together. Then they have a fight. Then they're together, and then she dies. I mean, all these different stories. Carmen, where they have this very incredibly sexy woman who seduces the police officer into getting her out of jail with the promise that she would run away with him. And well, has a kind of a tragic ending too. But I mean, the stories, and so it inspired me to this was what music is. It's not just that it was written hundreds of years ago, but it was written by humans who had love and passion in their lives, and they were expressing it in the music. And so I was just completely sold as a kid, and it just didn't stop after that.
Yeah. What a great experience
Yeah.
to go traveling around Europe with your parents at 12.
Yeah, and I owe my parents
Yeah.
that. I mean, it was just fantastic. Wouldn't have happened without them.
And I guess I mean, I guess it was your mother who was also a musician who really kind of pushed that training and that
Right.
European kind of
Yeah.
classical
Mhm.
training music that,
Right.
yeah, that would have been great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great. It was
So after this, like, European tour at 12, how do you come back and focus on playing music after that? Like, what's the short-term goal?
the short-term goal is to play with others, find others who are also very, very good.
Mm.
So they had competitions like All County, which you would audition for, All State, which was much harder to get into, and I actually got into All State. I was, 2nd chair All State when I was maybe 14 or 15.
For all of
And
California?
for yeah.
Wow.
And so I was getting calls from colleges, even in my, years in junior high school, from UCLA, from different schools about, wanting to keep track of me and, wanting me to their school eventually.
Can you get a
So
scholarship for music?
oh, big time.
Oh, really? That's a
Big
thing.
time. In fact, I have, students who were Rhodes Scholars. I have students who were, um, they did very well. They went to some of the biggest and best and, schools, most famous schools.
Mhm,
Um, not that you have to be big and famous to be a good school,
mhm.
but, no, absolutely. You can get a scholarship for throwing a football for 60 yards or being able to dunk or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But also, playing music, and places like if you're majoring in some science and you are a former all-state clarinetist or oboist, Stanford, places like that, they love students who have that background as well.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you come back and you're hunting to play with other great artists,
Right.
other great musicians. So
Right.
you do the all the competitions, you get into the all-state competition.
Right.
And then, I mean, what was the quality like at your school? Like, did you have a
Great.
no? So, because some people like they go to a school specifically for a music program,
Right.
but you seem to maybe find your musical challenges outside of your academic life.
I suspect that it's similar if you're playing basketball and it's gonna be up to a certain level at your school, certainly a college level.
Mhm.
But when you're a kid, I'm not sure what it's called, but they have leagues, and you can get invited to certain leagues
Yeah, like
that
prep leagues. Yeah.
yeah, and traveling teams and things like that. And so then the competition is higher.
Hmm.
So I got into a youth orchestra in LA, Peter Marenblum's youth orchestra, which was a kind of a melting pot of young talent, had been there. He actually came from a similar, background to my parents, and from Eastern Europe. And, so he had a youth orchestra, and I was there, and then I went to the Music Academy of the West in Santa Barbara, which is a place where, conservatory students, I was one of the youngest, but, from Eastman and Juilliard and Curtis from all over, go for the summer, and that's where I got the idea of going, on with music and to audition for a school called Curtis Institute of Music, which is a highly selective, about a 3% acceptance rate, is all scholarship. If you get in, it doesn't cost anything.
Wow.
Um,
And so, how old were you when you went to that Santa Barbara?
Music Academy of the West
Yeah.
during high school summers.
Yeah.
So, what, 15, 16, 17, something like that, 18.
And that summer program gave you the idea that, like, hey, I can make a living out of this. Like, I can have this as my career.
I never thought so much about that. I thought kind of this is what I love to do. I love to play, love to work with all these great people,
Hmm.
and I love the music, and I wanted to do what my teacher in Vienna did. And so I didn't think so much about it. It's crazy to think you're going to go to college to learn how to play the clarinet. Great. What are you going to do? How are you going to make money?
Yeah, I'm just curious. Like, at this stage, like, what were your parents saying? Like, were they realists? Like, hey, you need to learn economics and accounting or engineering, or were they just like, be as creative as you want, live life?
Well, it wasn't so much like that, but they saw that I was good at it, and so I could turn the head of the principal clarinetist in the Vienna Philharmonic, and people thought that I was really good, and they were sort of musicians, and so that was their background. My dad, being a teacher, was a Phi Beta Kappa. He was the really good student, but yeah, they were not the kind of parents that would say, "Well, you should do that, as an avocation, and that you're better off." And later, I thought there were times when I thought, when I was at school at Curtis, I got into Curtis, and I hated it in Philadelphia. Everybody was pale and staying inside all the time and practicing, and
Winter?
the winter was horrible, and it was like the ghettos were tough. The broken glass. I used to go to the baseball game every night. I used to go to Connie Mack Stadium in Philadelphia, and the neighborhood was terrible. Um, but as soon as I went to the ballpark, that's where I came alive, and so I just loved that. It was like therapy for me, being so far away from home, and I loved those evenings and when they had the rain out, oh god, it was like I had to go all the way home, and I'm thinking, "Oh my god, here I am in Philadelphia, and what am I doing here?"
Mhm.
So
How hard was that moving across the country and leaving your parents
at
behind?
first, it was fun. It was really interesting. I was gonna go room with a buddy of mine that I met in Santa Barbara, the Music Academy, and so I thought, "Wow, this is gonna be so much fun. I'm just gonna go and I'm gonna play my clarinet, and it's gonna be really great." But the reality every day of had to find what I was gonna eat. My parents gave me a little bit of money, a few $100 a month, maybe 500, and 250 was for rent
Right.
with a roommate. And we had to there's some funny stories where one where I was with a friend of mine I remember Harvey House. It was a hamburger place, and we're in line, and we see 2 hamburgers. We used to split 1 hamburger at a restaurant, but this is a special thing. We were really hungry.
Yeah.
We see 2 cheeseburgers on a table, and we're getting to the top of the line, front of the line, front of the line. Nobody's coming back.
Mhm.
Nobody's coming back for We sat down, looked around, and started eating the cheeseburgers, and then I got this really awful feeling from behind me, and it was sure enough, the people's an older couple, and they said, "Are you from Curtis?" 'Cause they knew that the students there sometimes didn't have a lot of money, and we said, "Yeah," and I said, "Oh, that's okay, don't worry about it," and then they left.
Oh, that's sweet of
We
them.
ended up eating their food.
Yeah. For free tuition, but they don't help you out with getting
No,
through the week of food, do they?
no.
So what was that like kind of getting a scholarship at 18 and getting a chance to be surrounded by professional musicians? That must have been amazing.
It was the letter. I stayed the next couple of days after my audition, and the lady at the front desk, very stern. It's a very fancy house, the mansion. I think maybe Sellers or some very famous architect built this house and others in Center City, Philadelphia. Dark wood, Rembrandts, Persian rugs. I mean, it was really like someplace I hadn't been. Um, and so I made friends with the lady at the front desk who was taking charge of everybody coming and going. And she said, I think this is for you, David. And so she gave me this very formal envelope, obviously white envelope. And I took it. She said, you should take it into the next room and open it. And, she was just for kind of, I was thinking, well, for sure I didn't get in. So I opened it and welcome to the Curtis Institute of Music. So it was a big deal. The only other letter I remember getting that had that significance and obviously had more significance for me was when I got my letter saying that I had tenure as a professor
Mhm.
years and years later. That was because I had just come from driving my cab. So I didn't want to go back to that.
No, I can imagine.
So opening that letter saying you've been awarded tenure, those 2 letters, getting into Curtis
Mhm.
and becoming a professor with tenure at Montclair State University, New Jersey.
Well, that's so nice.
It worked out, but it was a long and winding road getting there. A lot of rejection, a lot of things that I tried out for and didn't get.
Mhm.
Um, it was tough.
So Curtis is a 4-year school?
It's a 4-year school, and then I went to Europe uh, afterwards. My girlfriend got a Fulbright. choosing the opera department, I got what I called a half right. Uh, just was going with her because I didn't wanna say goodbye to her.
Mhm.
So we went back to Vienna. So then I came back to Philadelphia, and I was asked to be part of a program called Advanced Studies in Chamber Music, which was a kind of a graduate, it was their first foray into being a graduate school as well. Um, this was around 1974, something like that.
Can we just take
Yeah.
a beat here?
Yeah.
So when you graduate, Curtis, so first of all, you got into this super elite school in Philadelphia. So 3%, acceptance rate. So when you go into a school like that and you finish a school like that, are there jobs waiting for you?
Mm, it depends. If you play a string instrument, if you play a violin, and people who hear this, if they're string players, they're gonna be rolling at their eyes. But it's true. There are 20 places for a string player, maybe 25. There's one seat for a clarinetist or two. In an orchestra, typically there are 3 or 4 clarinetists, but there are stands and stands of celli and violins and violas, so there are more openings,
Mm.
for string players than there are. So there some of my to answer your question, one of my colleagues at Curtis, he became principal cello in Cincinnati, which is a really good job, before he graduated, Curtis. A dear friend of mine from LA, Abe Abe Weiss, he became a principal, bassoonist in Rochester before he graduated, Curtis. So it's possible, depending on what openings are out there and that kind of thing.
I didn't know there was like a hierarchy amongst like the musicians and which instruments you play and how many spots there are for each different kind.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah, it's tough.
Yeah.
Piano's probably the hardest of all because in an orchestra, there's only one, and a pianist, it's very difficult to make it, as a pianist.
Yeah, no, I bet. Okay, so without having like a guaranteed job, you went to Europe with your girlfriend, and how long did that like? Did you go for a year?
About a year.
Yeah.
About a year. She got a job in Basel,
Hmm.
and, so went to Basel with her, and I turned into a house boyfriend. I was the cook and cleaning and all that, but I had had some success already in the States. I was invited, by the director of Curtis, Rudolph Serkin, to a place called Marlborough, which is a haven for classical musicians. That's where I started playing with Yo-Yo Ma, with people who, have since become, icons of classical music. Um, and I was starting to play with Mr. Serkin as well, this, venerable, I mean, he was a legendary pianist, and so he wanted to play with me while I was at Curtis, and so but then I wanted to go with Emily, my half-brite, and, I paid for it later because, I had to say goodbye. I had nothing to do. There was nothing for me in Europe, and so I had to come back.
But when you went to Europe the first time with your parents,
Yeah.
they got you into some studies, they
Oh,
got you
yeah.
training with people. But when you
Absolutely.
went back, like when you went back at 22 or 23, it was there's nothing to do.
I met with Professor Yettel again. He got me a job in this, Wiener Walzer Orchestra. We played in the park,
Hmm.
and even the lowest job that even the people from Vienna, a musician from Vienna wouldn't be caught dead and then playing in the it was all people who had just escaped from Eastern Europe.
Oh wow.
And, friend of mine I sat next to was from Poland, and that wasn't easy in those years to escape, Iron Curtain and all that.
Sure.
So, yeah, so that was great, and I played in the ball season, which took place where women were in these gowns, Cinderella gowns, and horse-drawn carriages, and I'd play from 9 at night till 5 in the morning for $20, and that was it, and it was great. I was, but that had a life. I did that for a while, and decided that was especially when Emily got a job in Basel, I wanted to go to Basel.
Hmm.
So
And then what was it like coming back to the United States after your second tour of Europe?
yeah. Well, it was at first it was tough, but I realized that that was the place for me, especially when I got a phone call saying, "Come on into Curtis. We have some thing we'd like to ask you if you want to be part of." And that was this whole program set up for us, very few students, a wind quintet, 5 of us, a string quartet, four, maybe a couple of pianists, and that was the whole graduate program. And we were going to get the best teachers and the best training. And Mr. Sirkin, this great pianist, said he was going to play with us at the Museum of Modern Art, no, Metropolitan Museum in New York, Storrs, Connecticut, New England Conservatory, the Kennedy Center, at 5 places around the East Coast. He was going to commit to performing with us at each of these places if each venue would hire us for 5 years.
Hmm.
They had to hire us for 5 consecutive years, and he would play one concert of those 5 with us, and then we would play with other great pianists
Hmm.
as well. So it launched us on a career, and we did very well, and we actually commissioned a piece that became a very famous piece in that repertoire. It's a very small, it's not popular music, it's classical music, but the piece that we recorded and is now all over the world was written by John Harbison, who um, is such an important composer that I think it's an MIT. I'm not sure how much he teaches, but his name is in the book, in their book, and he does very well financially, and his name is in the book. Yeah.
So this graduate program was basically just like best teachers, but you had the chance to be showcased at all these great venues.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course play with the director who was a legendary
Right.
pianist.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I mean, you were getting a lot of exposure.
Right. And doing just exactly what I wanted to do, playing in small groups and that kind of thing. The opportunities to play for a musician, a classical musician, is to be in an orchestra. That's 98% of it. And if you're not in an orchestra and you play the clarinet, it's really tough. Unless you get a teaching job, which I did, but I was 40 when I got my teaching job. I did part-time work. I subbed for a colleague of mine at Yale.
Mhm.
I subbed for colleagues of mine at different universities, but I got a full-time job. But I was 40 years old, and
Mhm.
so
So after this like 4 or 5 year graduate program, like where did you head out after that? Like was it time to look for work or were you still looking to
I was
train?
looking for work. I moved to New York.
Mhm.
And that's when I get a call from a colleague of mine. I'd been playing in this orchestra called Orpheus, Orpheus Chamber Orchestra, and playing for free. Actually, subs got paid, members didn't get anything. We would play for free in the public libraries. Had no conductor, 20, 25 musicians, no conductor.
Mhm.
The idea is when you're playing chamber music, there's no conductors, one person to a part, and everyone has a say in how it's going to go. Everyone has a say. And when you're in an orchestra, typically for most of the musicians in the orchestra, the conductor tells you what to do, and your colleagues will tell you how to sit, and it's very crazy. But in chamber music, you're free to play things more according to how you feel it should go. Anyway, Orpheus was a group based on chamber music, starting playing for free. The only time in our history, I think, in our country, where a group that size, without any support, started playing for free, ended up winning Grammy awards, Grammy nominations, Grammy awards. Had one of the largest, maybe the largest recording contract with a major label, Deutsche Grammophon. We recorded 70 recordings with them that we can still hear on Sirius XM, the Symphony Hall. We're driving in a car, and my wife, says, "Hey, that's you and Orpheus." And I'm thinking, "What? No, I don't think so. Sounds too good." Turns out it's us that we did maybe 20 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So that was Orpheus, and that was a big deal. With them is where the adventure starts in my life. We did our first, we substituted at the last minute for a group in Carnegie Hall. Great review, great response. The following year, 1979, we're off to Israel, India, um, all over the place. So in the years that I was with Orpheus, we had angry mobs chasing us in Kolkata. How would you say it now? The Bengalis, whatever they say, but
Yeah, the English pronunciation is like with a C and the Indian pronunciation is with a K, I think. So Kolkata.
anyway, chasing us
It's
because
in there. I can't remember.
yeah, our embassy in Iran had just been taken over, and the people in whatever Calcutta, many of them sleep on there are a million people, they say, sleep on the streets in Calcutta. Anyway, They were burning American flags and turning cars over, and we had to get out of there. We're staying at this very fancy English hotel, officers' hotel, and, one night it was, 3, 4 in the morning, had to sneak out of town and with guards and everything. We didn't know which way they were gonna point their guns, and we went to the airport, and there was a Pan Am plane waiting for us and took us to Frankfurt, and yeah, that was one of the things. We were in Bolivia during revolutions. My room in Tel Aviv was stormed by hotel security because I didn't check into the, hotel properly. I arrived after the group, and I went right to bed. I was given a key by the manager, sleep, and bang, bang, bang at the door, and all these little men, I remember these little men saying, "What are you what are you doing here? What are you" and I thought, "My God, what's going on?" I showed them my clarinet case, I'm a musician, and they calmed down a little bit after that, but I don't know, all kinds of weird things happen.
Well, that's what happens when you travel, right? You just
Yeah.
put yourself out into the world and shit happens.
It's great, I love it.
It's the best.
Yeah.
Okay, so you play with this Orpheus group. So for how many years were you total in that?
So I started with them in '78, and I retired in 2013, 14.
Oh, wow, a long stretch.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
And what were you doing apart from being in that orchestra?
apart from being in the orchestra, well, in the let me get this straight. So from around 1980 to pretty much from 80 to 89, I was doing other things.
Yeah, because you told me that you didn't get paid for that, but like you did some recordings and you do some events and stuff like that, but you don't get like a salary, right?
Didn't get a salary, but when we were working, we were making pretty good money.
Mm-hmm.
But before that, it was tough. I drove a cab.
Mm-hmm.
I drove a cab a couple times. Well, I mean, my life. One of the things I played for the president of the United States. The same day, came back to New York City, got in my cab.
Same day.
Same day, and so I'm driving, and I'm saying, I look back to my passenger. I say, "Guess what I did today?" And they, they didn't. They're looking at their watch, looking around. They want to get out. They're not feeling uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Who is this guy?
Yeah.
And another time I played with
Was that Reagan or Carter?
Carter.
Okay.
Carter.
Oh, you played for a president. That's
I
wild.
played and then another, I played for Clinton too. I played for Clinton.
He did the saxophone, didn't he? Yeah.
That's all he wanted to talk about. It was so great. We were supposed to just play for him. Just about 7 or 8 of us played, and we were just gonna meet him and Hillary. I don't know what to call her. I'll call her Hillary. Anyway, not that I know her, but I met her. I spent an evening with them, sort of. But they said, "No, you can stay. We're gonna have a party." And his Hollywood crowd, Chevy Chase was there, Goldie Hawn was there, and it was our last days of innocence, of our country. It was so. I want to get this right. It was 2000. It was December of 2000. It was just before, I guess, was W. Bush came after because when going into 2001, then 9 months later or 8 months later it was 9/11.
Right, and 9/11 happened when Bush was in office. So Bush won the election in November 2000, and then he took office January 2001, yeah.
So I was in the Oval Office, sitting in a chair. Believe it or not, not going to get into trouble anymore, right? It's finished. But they didn't. It was great. It was a beautiful time because yeah. Anyway, that was a magical evening. And he wanted to talk about the saxophone and reeds and who knows what he'd been. But I remember speaking with Hillary, and she was running against Lazio, this guy Lazio from Long Island, from where,
Governor, gosh, he was the senator from New York.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So she really cleaned his clock, and the night before, and I said, "Man, you really wiped the floor with him." And she laughed, and what do you say to these people?
Yeah.
But anyway, it's a great experience.
Yeah, because she was a 1 or 2-term senator, and then she was Barack Obama's Secretary of State. And then she ran for the White House and lost to Trump. That's, I think, Hillary Clinton's arc.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's wild. Some memories in there, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny, like, I moved to China in 2001 and really disconnected in a massive way from US politics and just everything until now, because I've only been in the United States now for 14 months or so.
Oh, so 9/11, you were in China?
In 9/11, I was in Toronto, Canada,
Oh.
and I was working in down in Wall like, in the Canadian version of Wall Street, the Torontonian version of Wall Street, like, down in the financial district, and I was in a high-rise building working at a financial asset management company. Just, it was like a summer job, and I was just finishing, the work, and I was working through September because 'cause I'd already graduated by that stage. I graduated in May the same year, so I traveled a little in the summer, and then I worked right up until I left for China, and I left for China right after 9/11. So,
Wow.
probably it was funny, like, I was working, and then 9/11 happened, and then my grandfather passed away, and then I quit my job, and then I went to China. So, like, all that happened in, like, the 10 days around 9/11. But by kind of the end of September, I was already traveling in China. Yeah.
Were you wasn't it a little scary to go to some place like China or Saudi Arabia? I know you were
Yeah.
I mean, those are not, those are they can be very difficult and for a lot of reasons.
I'm better moving. Like, I'm more I feel like more confident, more competent. I'm better when I'm moving because I feel like my senses are high. I'm in the zone of traveling, taking care of yourself, seeing new things, meeting new people. It's being in a city like LA for 8 months straight without traveling or getting out to see things. That's when I start to go cuckoo.
Ah, wow.
Luckily, I have great guests to chat with every day. Thank you.
Well,
But
thank you. Honored, very honored to be with you.
yeah, but China was wild because I just went there for 3 months to check it out and then liked it and then just went back, and I was just like, "Whatever's gonna happen in my life, it's just gonna start here."
Initially, when you went I'm asking you some questions.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
I love it, I love it, go for it.
Um, so initially, you went there not to spend years and years.
Mhm,
How
yeah.
old were you when you first went there?
So I graduated from university in, May 2021, so I would have been about I was 22 at that stage. So I went to China when I was 22, and when I left in September 2001, I'd only planned to go for 3 months. So I planned out, like, I didn't wanna take a tour, I wanted to go by myself, I wanted to be independent, so and this was before the internet, really, like, this was before Google Maps and Airbnb and everything like that. So, I wrote to the Chinese consulate in Toronto and said, "Hey, I wanna go to China. Can you send me some maps and some booklets and some tourist sites and things like that?" And I ended up getting, like, a huge package from them with everything. So it was amazing. So I would sit there at night at the dining room table, and I would, like, plan out my trip to China. I was like, "Okay, I wanna go see these terracotta warriors in Xi'an, and then from there, I wanna go to Jiaoyuguan, or Dunhuang, and from there, I wanna go out to the border with China and Pakistan, the highest active border crossing in the world at, 17,000 feet." And then so I was, like, putting all these things together of all the things I wanted to visit. Mount Everest base camp I went to, Lhasa in Tibet. So I put together this whole list, and then I tried to figure out, like, "Okay, how do I get from here to here? How do I do it as cheaply as possible? Where do I sleep?" And then and then as I started traveling longer distances, because in the East, that's where all the big cities are, that's where a lot of the tourist sites are, and you do things during the daytime and things like that. But then as I started going further west, the train rides got really long because Western China is huge but empty. So then I would arrive in a town in the morning, have breakfast, leave my backpack at the train station in a locker, go out, explore the town, see the tourist sites, come back to the train station, eat dinner, get back on a train, do a night train. So I would sleep on the night train because they had bunks
Right.
to save money. And then I get to another place in the morning. So instead of, like, going out all day, staying in a hotel or a hostel or something like that, that's like how active I was about that first journey. And I loved it. It was
Were
amazing.
you there for the first time?
90 days.
The first time you went to China?
Yeah.
Wow.
Started and finished in Hong Kong.
And you were how old?
Yeah, like 22.
And you didn't get any hassles from, the authorities or anything like that?
Yeah, there were moments like there was I was at this beautiful lake called Siram Lake in western China near the border with Kazakhstan, and I remember from that lake, there was this highway that kind of goes out and then does a U and comes back. and I was gonna take the road out and then take the road back, but then I got off at this lake, and I was chatting with these fishermen guys,
Mm.
and they were kinda telling me, like, I can hike over the mountains, and
They
it's
spoke English?
no, not really, but I had, like, a phrase book, and we were kinda
Oh.
chatting through the phrase book, and they were kinda telling me, like, if I kinda hike over the mountain, I can pick up the road on the other side, and it's kinda really beautiful, and it's like a nice day trip. It's like 6 or 8 hours. So I stayed with them, and then the next day I went out and did the hike, but the thing is I went and did the hike, and then I came down on a military base, which is not good, and
Wow.
they didn't tell me that there was a military base there, and then when I was coming down, there was no real markings. So I came down and I walked onto a military base, and of course they stopped me, and they were like, "Hey, like, what the fuck are you doing here?" And then they brought me to a police station, and I just said, "Yeah, like, the fishing guys over there told me to walk over the mountain and then catch a bus going back the other way," and
You
they
said this in English or in Chinese?
so all of this through my guidebook and my translation book, like, there we had no apps and this kind of thing,
Did
right?
they physically search you?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Of course.
And then I had to wait another day at this police station. I slept at the police station. They didn't put me behind bars or put me in handcuffs or anything like that, but they did take my passport. But then the next day, they found an English teacher in one of the villages around where I was, and at this stage, I'm like maybe 100 miles from the border with Kazakhstan. So they always get a little itchy when you're in the border areas. But then I found this English teacher, and then the English teacher kind of interviewed me and said, "Hey, what are you doing? Where are you from? What's
You
going
found
on?"
them or they found?
They found the English teacher. So then I was being interviewed and stuff like that, and then eventually they're like, "Okay, we're taking you to the bus station." So they took me to the bus station and then watched me get on the bus and say goodbye, and then I was back.
Oh.
Yeah. I got lots of stories like that.
You should write a book.
I've written 4 books.
You've written 4 books about your life.
No one reads them. Yeah, I do. I actually more people listen to the audiobooks now. I did the audiobooks.
Audiobooks.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what I should do too.
It's nice, yeah. I mean, people listen to podcasts, people listen to audiobooks. They like to listen while they're doing something else or when they're driving to work,
Agree.
yeah, at the gym.
Right.
But actually putting a paper book in your hand and reading it, I think, it's a limited audience these days. Yeah. But I tell these stories all the time, and they're great. Like, I do like a little one man show where I get up and talk in front of an audience and things like that, and I tell them all these stories from the past. We just did one last Friday, actually. We were doing these benefits for the victims of the fire here in
Of
LA.
course.
Yeah. Trying to raise some money and some goods for the Salvation Army and stuff.
That's great.
Yeah. But let's get back to you.
Okay.
So you're in New York, you're with this orchestra group,
Yeah.
and when you're working with them, the money's good, and when you're not, you're driving a taxi.
Driving a cab. But I did other things too. I performed with an actress named Stockard Channing, who was in Greece. She was the wife of the president in West Wing on TV.
Mhm.
And-
Martin Sheen.
yes.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. She was in a play called 6 Degrees of Separation on Broadway. Anyway, so the play was called The Lady and the Clarinet. So obviously, and it was just the two of us on stage the whole time. And she goes through her life of 3, 4 boyfriends, and I'm hired to play background music, and they kind of go through their relationship from the lustful beginnings to the middle to the end, and having fights, and then that particular man would leave, and then she would come over to me and kind of I would kind of console her. I didn't have any words. I just kind of would just kind of talk with her. I mean, I just silently just listened to her. And then I would play, and then another guy would come up. Anyway, the whole evening she did the whole show, and then at the end
So it was like a one woman show, and you're just on the stage with her.
with her, yeah,
That's beautiful.
yeah, it
Yeah.
was great. At the end, people would typically come up and uh, say congratulations or whatever. One night we did this at a theater called the Long Wharf Theater in New Haven, Connecticut. It's typically a theater where it's a place where shows go before they go to Broadway. And we got a great review in the New York Times from our performance. So one night, who comes up to me? Leonard Bernstein. The legend.
The
Maybe
legend.
nobody is greater in our field in classical music. No one's a bigger Paul McCartney,
Mhm.
the Beatles. Nobody's bigger in classical music than Leonard Bernstein. So he comes up to me, and in fact, my teacher from Vienna said that Leonard Bernstein was one of the greatest conductors of the Vienna Philharmonic. And so that's including Toscanini and Furtwängler and all these people. So Bernstein, West Side Story, I mean, he was, just unbelievable. So he comes up to me, cape with a red silk inside and the cigarette holder, and his entourage is with him. And he comes up to me and says, "Oh, David, you were wonderful.
Mm.
You were so wonderful." And I'm thinking, "Oh my God, this is the highlight of my life so far." And he said, "I really have a thing for good-looking clarinet players."
Nuts.
All I could say to him was, "Thank you."
Thank you for hitting on me.
Well, yeah, I mean, thank you. So
How respected globally do you have to be as a musician before you can start wearing a cape?
yeah, right, right. That's true. Well, in Europe they do that more, but yeah, he was doing it in Connecticut. Say, you did look a little odd, but
But you got a glowing review.
I got a glowing review, and you know, and it was funny because in his movie, I don't know if you saw the movie about him, the recent, relatively recent movie about him. It really focused on his excesses, his drugs and the drinking and being with everybody he could, I mean, there was so much more to him. He's such a genius. But part of that movie, he is in a theater and he goes to the pit where the musicians are, and a really good-looking clarinet player holding his clarinet goes up to Leonard Bernstein, and Bernstein says to him, "Oh, obviously they were together." And, it was just, because there was the good-looking clarinet player, and, they were together, and he, had, um, said what he said to me, another clarinet player. I used to be good-looking in those days. So, anyway.
Bradley Cooper just played him.
Yes,
Yes.
that was it. That's
That
what
wa
I'm
that
thinking.
was a yeah, the feature film, the
Yes.
the composer, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. We're on the same page now. I know who you're talking about finally.
Right, 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 right.
Okay, wow. So that's amazing. So but did you ever have a chance to play for him or
I
play?
Well, he didn't just heard me play that. No, I played for Leopold Stokowski, who is another name. I don't know if you know. A million years ago, Disney did a movie about Mickey Mouse. Fantasia was called, and Stokowski was conducting. So he was. But I played for him in Carnegie Hall actually. But no, I that was all. But yeah. Yeah.
That's wild. So did that Broadway like one woman show get a run? Like did you have a chance to do that for a couple months or
I
whatever?
remember I remember the car I was driving to get there because we were living in Peekskill, just north of New York City, and the car had bad windshield wipers and bad tires, and it was during the winter, and I had to drive and skid on the roads, and it could barely it was a mess. I mean, it was, barely making it.
I love what the mind remembers.
Yeah, that's it.
You don't remember the show, but the drive there and
It
back
was
was miserable.
miserable, and
Too many performances.
yeah. It was several weeks, but they did go to New York, but they changed everybody. They changed me, they changed the cast, and then they got roasted in the New York Times. So, served them right.
Fuck them. Fuck them.
Right.
How do you do that show in Connecticut and get a great review and then change everyone when you go to New That makes no sense. Like, just keep the same people.
Gordon Davidson, do you know any of these names? Because they work at the LA theater, LA whatever they call it, the big theater there by Disney. Gordon Davidson.
I don't know.
I don't know, yeah, he used to do a lot of productions there. Anyway, yeah.
Wild.
So then we decided, my wife at the time, we had a daughter. Our daughter was 3 or something, and she decided that she wanted to take her daughter from another marriage and our daughter, and move to Seattle, Washington.
Mhm.
And this was when I was playing with, in Carnegie Hall. Orpheus was starting out and everything, but I just had this feeling that my daughter needed me more than, um she needed both of us.
Mhm.
So I called Orpheus and I said, I'm going away and I'm gonna be living in Seattle." And they decided to wait for me for a year to have substitutes for me, but not to replace me.
Well, that's very generous of them.
It's really nice.
Yeah.
So I went to Seattle knowing that I wasn't gonna be able to play my music, so I got a job as a welder, as teaching welding rod. And this is pretty dangerous stuff because to get to the welders from companies big companies and small companies, the welders were confined. They were kind of in the back of a business. You'd have to usually go through the front door and speak to the purchasing agent if you're a salesman. And this is what I'm selling, and this is why it's good, and it costs so much. And then they would decide. Well, I couldn't afford to do that because it was just me and my daughter at that time. My wife and I were in and out, just at odds, and so I had to make money. And so I ended up sometimes climbing the fence in the back, and if there was a guard dog, I mean, it sounds funny now, but I had to run from the dog, and I had to meet that's how I would meet the welders, and then I would have them try the welding rod, and if they liked it, and they often did, they would go to the purchasing agent and say, "This is what we want," and that would make decent money.
Wow.
So I did that for almost a year.
And which did you like
Quite a bit.
better, playing classical
Yeah,
music
right,
or
right, playing in Carnegie Hall. But that didn't last long, and then I started a program called Music Magic with very young children, and that's what enabled me to be able to provide for my daughter and basically win the custody case. She was then to live with me until she, graduated from elementary school. So for the next 6 years, she was in nursery school at the time, she would be with me, and then she would go be with her mom in the junior high and high school. And then we went back to New York and you know,
what was living in Seattle like in the early '80s, right?
Seattle's a wonderful
Oh,
town.
yeah.
And north of Seattle, the San Juans, have you ever been there?
No.
The San Juan Islands? Oh, the American San Juans are beautiful, the Canadian San Juans. I went to a place once. To get there, you have to go to Vancouver, take a ferry to Victoria, and then you've gotta drive someplace and take a ferry to an island and then drive to the other side of the island, take a you have to take 3 ferries to get to this island called Hornby. It's where, um, apparently a lot of people who didn't wanna go to the draft in Vietnam went because it was, like, really hard to find them.
To hide out.
And people would barter in the stores if you wanted something, you could your shirt or whatever, and gorgeous, just different thing, kayaking and all the different things that people do on these island.
Mm.
So, we went there sometimes. It was just great.
That sounds
Ju oh,
beautiful, peaceful.
you really gorgeous wilderness and
Mm.
off the grid, you can be very easily. So,
And mountains everywhere.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, beautiful country, Northwest.
Sounds magic.
Yeah.
So you use that year to kinda regain custody of your daughter, and then you move back to New York?
Moved back to New York.
Yeah. What was that like? Like, coming back with your daughter, like, did you feel like you'd succeeded in whatever mission that you had tried to accomplish?
Yeah, I mean, I'd been through some stuff having to do other things before driving a cab, but then selling welding rod was so different, and also the welders sometimes they got a kick out of putting their machines at the wrong polarity. And so I don't remember exactly what the different kinds, but if you put a welding rod to metal and it's the wrong polarity, you get a terrible shock. And they used to play this game called "Let's Light Up the Welding Rod Salesman,"
Mhm.
and it was really brutal. It was tough. But I had an incident where I saw a friend of mine from Curtis who graduated from Curtis, who's an opera singer. I saw him one day in Philadelphia. I'm sorry I'm skipping around, but he was he just could not be consoled. He was crying. His chest was going up and down, just standing outside of a playground. He had just said goodbye to his son,
Mhm.
and he got a job singing in Vienna at a place called the Volksoper. But he's an opera singer, got a job,
Mm.
but he had to move. He had to leave his wife, his son, and I guess they were estranged anyway, but at least he was able to see his son when he was in Philadelphia, but he wasn't able to sing.
Mhm.
So for him to be able to do what he was supposed to do, he had to move to the other side of the world. I swore that that wasn't gonna be me. I wasn't gonna be doing that, and so I stuck it out in Seattle and, went back to New York with her, and, although 6 years later, she left, and that was horrible, but,
Mhm.
gotta get on with their lives, so,
Yeah, that's amazing.
yeah.
Like, from the outside looking in, from my perspective, like, I would never ask a classical musician to do anything other than just play classical music. Like, learning about welding rods and
Right.
having all these other jobs makes no sense.
Right.
And for me, it's it's bizarre because, like, for example, you want to be a doctor, you go to university for 8 years, you do your residency, and you've basically got a job for life.
Sure.
Like, why is music not like that? Because you put in the same amount of fucking time.
Right.
You put in just as much effort, maybe even more. You dedicate your life to it. You're not saving lives. Maybe you are. Like, musicians save lives. Like, right? Like,
They
music
make
is
lives more enjoyable.
right. But there's no like safety net. There's no automatic jobs for anyone.
In our country, it's harder. It's tougher than it is in other places. If you're an artist, I understand in living in the parts of Scandinavia, you can qualify as an artist if you have painted some things and shown in a couple of galleries. You get a little stipend from the government, and
It's a living wage.
it in Vienna, it seems a waitress can have a house. A waitress can just be a waitress. Well, we're getting political now. So, I mean, we can do that too. But and that's enough.
Mhm.
She has a house, she has money to pay for toys for her kids. They have a life.
Mhm.
And, it's hard.
Yeah. It's interesting when you travel, especially when you start traveling the world and you start to realize and you start to have friends that work in different places
Right.
and you start to realize, oh, they have free healthcare. Oh, they have free childcare. Oh,
College.
yeah, they have 50% tax. Oh, they have no tax.
Right.
Oh, like, oh, how do you and this I really want to bring this education to Americans.
Ah,
I think like if
would be
you're
so good.
wouldn't it? Like if you're like 14 years old sitting in high school, in Los Angeles, for example, and you're not teaching kids like how first of all how to make money, how to save money, how to manage money, and then also too like this is how much money you pay because you live in California and you live in Los Angeles and this is your tax rate. If you make this much money, you pay this much tax. But if you live in Dubai, you make zero tax. Or if you live in Vienna, you make this much. Or if you go showing people like how just educating. I think the
Great.
so many people get trapped in high tech situations or in financial messes because they don't understand what it's like in other places. And I've lived all over the world and I've tried to take advantage of all these opportunities as best I can. But it'd be so great to like educate people and be like, it doesn't have to be like that.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
people are kind of ignorant if they've never been any place,
Mm.
They think, "Oh my god, social those that's kind of like, a dirty word, social this or social that."
Yeah.
They call them entitlements. We call them entitlement. Well, yeah, everybody should have health insurance. I guess now you know what side I'm swing on. Big time. GI Bill, where'd that come from? All of that stuff. Medicaid. I mean, all of that. Hopefully, it'll be around for a little while longer.
Yeah. We'll have to see. We'll have to see.
Yeah.
But okay, so you come back with your daughter, you're still playing. They save that spot for you in the orchestra.
Yeah.
You're playing again and are you still are you driving a cab at this stage?
No.
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 So was the cab driving done by then?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's amazing that the first couple years in New York, uh, working for the orchestra, you were still driving a cab, and that's the best story ever. You played for the president of the United States, and then same day you were back driving your
Yep.
cab.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. As a world-class musician.
Well, yeah, some people thought so. So,
That makes no sense to me.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's there are waiters and there are actors. Jim Carrey, he was an actor
Canadian.
on, oh, is he Canadian?
Okay, yeah, of course.
I used to go to this place. What was it? It was on Ventura Boulevard. It's a restaurant. Anyway, you go to the restroom and you see pictures of sort of celebrities on the wall in uniform, uniform was a waiter.
Yeah.
And there was Jim Carrey.
Yeah.
He was you know.
Every actor I've talked to on the podcast has great stories about the first jobs they did in LA before they could make a living as an actor or director or producer. Yeah, yeah. And it was all catering, acting,
Sure.
whatever they could get their hands on. Yeah.
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 So,
I was lucky. I was lucky because I went to China to pursue my creative storytelling path. And I was lucky I did that because the cost of living at the
that's true.
time was so low.
Yeah.
So like in Shanghai in 2001, 2002, I could have a 4-bedroom apartment with 2 other roommates and it would cost me like $300 a month.
Wow.
and then I could make. I was teaching English for the first couple months I was in Shanghai, but I could make 4 or 5 thousand US dollars a month teaching. So I had I had
Live like a king.
yeah, but then I was saving money and I was traveling
A
and I was
tenth of your income is goes for rent. My God.
it was incredible. Like we never cooked. We were out,
Yeah.
eating out all the time,
Yeah.
going out for drinks whenever we wanted. But I was able to save a massive amount of my money and then allocate that to pursuing my storytelling. So, like I cut a deal with my manager at the teaching school that I was working at. Is like I would do 2 weeks where I would work extra shifts, and then like 10 days I'd be gone.
Wow.
So then I would go out to some remote place in Western China and live with local villagers and photograph them and learn about their lives, and then come back with those pictures, write a little story, and package it all together. And I knew I could get like $1,000 for the whole package at a local magazine or something like that. So I was already, but it's only because I wasn't bankrupting myself living in LA or New York.
That's right.
Yeah. That's the only reason I got to do any of the fun things I did in China, because I got there when the cost of living was low enough. But now Shanghai is one of the most expensive cities in the world. It's crazy. Yeah. Sorry, that was like my little aside there.
That's right.
Yeah.
That was great.
So what did you do? So when you were still working for the orchestra in New York, what replaced the taxi driving? Like, like what other kind of jobs did you have at that time?
I was playing a sort of second clarinet, sometimes first clarinet for a group called the Lincoln Center Chamber Music Society,
Hmm.
which is kind of an elite group. I was doing music for Marlboro tours.
Hmm.
This festival, Marlboro. Um,
Back when cigarette companies could sponsor things?
I don't think that it's interesting. It was the town of Marlboro.
Oh, really? The town,
Yeah.
not the
No, 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 no,
okay.
no. That wouldn't have gone. But yeah, Marlboro was good. Again, Rudolf Serkin asked me to perform and record a sonata with him. Just me and him,
Wow.
and which was like he said he was waiting decades to find someone, a clarinetist who he would really want to record with, and so he picked me, and so that was unbelievable. And so we worked together for months and um, performed it at Marlboro, and then we recorded it just on LP. But then it was chosen as a record to be saved, basically, because LPs only last, at least the way they used to make them,
Mm.
so long, and then they're gone. So the Rager Society from Bonn, Germany, decided that they've heard this recording that I was on with Mr. Serkin, more because of him than me, because he's a household name in classical music.
But you stole the show on clarinet, let's be
I
honest.
was just I sold the show on clarinet. Just the 2 of us, just the 2 of us. He was 70 something, I was 20 something, and, we made this recording. So it was redone by, an engineer from the BBC. He started his own company called Pristine Classical in France. Andrew Rose is his name. And, he he remastered it, and on the same CD is a recording from when Mr. Serkin was 20, my age when I was playing with him, when Mr. Serkin was 20, which was probably around 1920, Andrew Rose had this, he's just an engineer, he's a genius with making the sound come to life as it was when it was done, when it was played. He's just an amazing engineer, and he has this recording company called Pristine Classical, and, you can buy the greatest old recordings remastered by him, Andrew Rose, and today you can go online, but, so I have access to, because I'm one of the only living people who he has recorded. Everybody else is, gone already. Anyway,
That's good. That's
I have
quite a
access
thing,
to
though.
all this music and get it all for free, so
That's that's amazing. So when every time you recorded, you mentioned you did some 70 plus recordings as well with your orchestra group. Like, do you get royalties from that as well? Like, I'm just trying to understand like how musicians
we used
survive.
I used to get a really nice check every summer.
Yeah.
Last summer was getting better. I think it was maybe, I'm not sure why, but I don't know how it really works, but we used to get a kind of a royalty. Musicians here, when they do movies, I know they get royalty checks. But I think YouTube must have, I use as a professor, I used YouTube a lot in my classes. So because of YouTube, though, I think it also has eaten into the fact that people aren't buying classical records anymore
Mhm.
as much as they used to. So
No, but YouTube has become a venue now for artists to make money, right? So, like, a musician that you might fancy, say, just for example, like randomly, say, Paul McCartney, he might come out with a new single
right.
and put it on YouTube, and he makes a huge amount of money of people watching it and listening to it from YouTube or Apple,
Is the only way you can access it is to pay some money?
well, no, so people don't so people don't, pay YouTube to watch it, but because they're watching it, they run ads on it,
Oh.
and then the owner of that content gets an ad share. So that's what happens with my podcast.
Oh, I see.
So this podcast will go on YouTube,
Mhm.
and then, for every 1,000 people that watch it, I get a certain amount of money. And then,
Right.
yeah, if millions of people watch it, you get more. If 10,000 people watch it, you get
Yeah.
a little less. So it's based on the ads that
Yeah.
people consume while they're. So that's how it's called. That's how free content works. You do an ad share with the platform.
So that's a good thing. Yeah. So, but to answer your question, I guess when people were buying the CDs more, we were making more money, and now a little bit less. But as I say, when you have a recording that you did and it's re-released
Hmm.
on disc, then people are become interested again in certain things. So
Yeah,
yeah, so that's fun.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So, okay, so let's push this up. So when did you start teaching?
I've taught a long time. I I really enjoy working with young people. Um, Trying to think. As I say, I subbed for a colleague of mine who is the clarinet professor at Yale. I did the graduate program there, and for a couple of years, and I taught a little bit at Dartmouth. Did a little bit. Um, we used to do master classes at Dartmouth, but I always enjoyed it. And I remember my first job at Curtis. I used to have to take a bus. It was freezing cold waiting for the bus in the wintertime on the street corner.
So you went back to Curtis to
No,
teach?
no, no, no,
Oh,
no. I didn't go back to Curtis to teach, but while I was a student at Curtis,
okay.
I got a job teaching in Cinnaminson, New Jersey. So to get there, you had to wait for the bus,
Yeah.
probably a half hour. It's free, 20 degrees or something, and the wind chill ridiculous. You get on the bus and you go to Cinnaminson, New Jersey. I don't remember how long it took. You get off the bus, you walk about a mile to get to the school, and if nobody showed up, you didn't get paid.
Oh, that's bullshit. You just
It
took a
was my
bus.
first job as a teacher.
Yeah.
And then I get on the bus, come home, and you make nothing.
Mhm.
So so it was always a dream of mine because I wasn't having any luck or auditioning for orchestras.
Mm.
They wanted a certain way, the music or the sound. I wasn't interested. I wasn't involved with music to play like somebody else had done, and that somebody else had done after that person. There's a tradition in orchestral playing to sound a certain way and to phrase a certain way. Certain solos have to be played a certain way. And I was not interested enough to listen to old recordings to want to copy anybody. I wanted to be you don't go into music for a livelihood, at least I couldn't, to learn how to play like somebody else was playing.
Mhm. You had your own
I
style.
wanted to be myself, and that cost me at auditions. I would, "Thank you," you play a little, "Thank you very much,"
5 seconds in. Yeah, you're done. Yeah.
"Thank you." So, that's, so that's it. So, but Orpheus came along and you could almost do what you wanted to do. Although it wasn't, instead of one conductor, it could be 29 people turning around and say, "Hey, Dave, could you do this? Or can you play a little faster, slower, or higher, or lower, or whatever?"
'Cause it was chamber, not
It was
orchestra.
chamber. Yeah. So there wasn't one boss, but in Orpheus, sometimes there could be 20 bosses. And but it was a good situation. And you were more free to be able to express yourself.
Okay.
So
That
yeah.
was more your style.
That's what I wanted to do, and then I got a job, and I think part of the job reason I stuck out, when you audition for an orchestra, when you go out for being a professor, It's really hard to be a tenure track professor. Really tough. Lot of competition. Um, one of the things that I was told that sold them on me was the fact that I had put together a program in the schools for young children called Music Magic and implemented it. And they saw that it was successful based on letters of that I had been from parents and from principals of schools, both in Seattle and in New York, and it was a big success. And so because I did that, they needed recruitment in the school in the music department. We were in a barracks, literally like an army barracks. And by the time I left 23 years later, we had the major building on campus, right in the front of school. I was part of a team that we were pretty successful at drawing attention to Montclair State, lots of reasons, and it became a big success. And so I got tenure. I was promoted to full professor. And the kicker is, I never got a bachelor's degree. And they knew it.
Yeah.
I had to be upfront with it.
Yeah.
I never got I went to Curtis. Curtis was not an accredited school for academics. It was a music school. And so it's like going to, I always say it was like going to, what's the kind of school, if you want to be an auto mechanic, you go to a tech school?
A trade
A
school
trade school.
Yeah.
Curtis was a trade school.
for musicians.
Yeah. I mean, Leonard Bernstein, Aaron Copland, Samuel Barber, Lang Lang. Some people will know who these people are, but these are icons in classical music.
Lang Lang is the Chinese pianist. Yeah, I saw him play in China once. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's a story about his audition. Everybody had to audition for Curtis. You could not get in without an audition. And he said, "Well, I'm Lang Lang." And they didn't know who he was. So when he came to audition for Curtis, apparently he had suitcases enough to fill this room from floor to ceiling. And thinking, well, of course I'm going to get in. And of course he did get in, but just the chutzpah, in a way,
The bravado.
yeah, that he would have for bringing all his stuff to Philadelphia all the way from China. Of course he was going to get it, and he did.
That's confidence.
Yeah, that's right.
When you show up with 100 suitcases and an entourage.
Right.
So that's nice. So you were able to stick out with it out with the orchestra and still teach at the same time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. No, of course. And that was also something that was attractive because some of my students, I got some of our students at Montclair State, which is from my office, I could see New York City. I mean, it was like a dream come true. It was a corner office upstairs, second floor. I could see Manhattan from my office. That's how close it was. Some of my colleagues, they had good positions, but it was at Yale or Stony Brook, and it was much further away. Most of them didn't have full-time positions like I did. So it was a coup for me.
How important is it to be like, if you want to be a professional musician, how important is it to be just like a stone's throw away from Manhattan?
It's a dream. You go where the job is.
Yeah.
Go to Timbuktu. It doesn't matter. Wherever the job is, that's where you have to go. That's what makes having any kind of romance tough. You can. Who do you meet? You meet people who are going to the same school with the same drive that you have, and one person gets a job in St. Louis, and another one gets a job in San Diego, and see you later, baby.
You have to figure out whose career is going to suffer first
Well,
if you want to stay together.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's tough.
That's not easy.
No.
Did you ever go back to Europe, like, in a full-time kind of way? Like, because I mean, it seemed like you had such a great time there when your parents took that gap year,
Oh, yeah.
that sabbatical, and it seems like, Vienna is just such a like a hotspot for classical music,
Yeah.
obviously because of the Philharmonic and stuff. Like,
Right.
I'm just wondering, like, if you'd ever thought, like, I just got to get back to Europe and stay for a few years.
We talk about it. My wife and I go now in December, Christmas time.
Oh, that's when they
3
say
weeks,
yeah,
4 weeks, and all that kind of stuff.
beautiful.
And we have friends there,
Mhm.
and we've talked about moving there, but they have their own issues now with the government, and there's some things going on, far right stuff,
Yeah.
far right.
And it's affecting the way the music world is being portrayed, or the way the players are
As a
treated.
Jew, they have, I think, 10,000 Jews in Austria.
Mhm.
And that's where my family ran from
Right.
and barely made it.
Mhm.
out, and if yeah, yeah, the place that would be the most that would make the most sense would probably be Canada, but I don't know, but my daughter lives close by,
Mhm.
and love seeing her, and so my wife and I are here. So
Yeah.
yeah,
That's wild.
yeah,
Yeah. So when did you stop working in Montclair?
2012,
Okay.
and I moved back here.
And then you also gave up your seat in the orchestra at the same time, yeah?
Well, a little bit later, a couple of years later, I was still then living in LA and then going back to New York to do tours and things like that. But then I finally got old and that it was time to, just stay here. But been busy. I was in a play in the University of California, Santa Barbara called Indecent, which was an interesting play about two women who fell in love and of course, the college kids, they ate it up. It was great. It was wonderful. I was a klezmer clarinetist, a Polish clarinetist, a klezmer clarinetist, a Jewish folk music clarinet player, and that was my role in this play. It was a lot of fun.
Mhm.
Different things I'm doing.
Have you been able to teach out here as well, or was that just only on the East Coast?
I worked at SC actually on a project. The administration wanted their orchestra to have the experience that Orpheus has and provides. That is to play with a full ensemble without conductor, so that the musicians would make the decisions. Who leads this? Who's more important in the music? Who has the melody? Who has to support the melody? So they become actively involved with the process. So I was their coach
Mm,
for a semester, for a concert. Um, I worked with Young Musicians Foundation, which is an organization in Southern California. Um, but I had a lot of private students, and I work in the schools just with clarinet choirs. So it's chamber music, but it's with clarinets. So
mhm.
I do that.
Because this might seem totally off the wall, and I don't know how this stuff works, so I'm just asking questions.
Yeah.
But would you ever like record your own album? Because you seem like you told me, you play music, you play classical music, but you definitely play it in your own style. And you mentioned like your goal was never to copy the famous orchestras of the past and things like
Right.
that. I'm just curious, like if you've ever had 10 songs or a body of music that you thought you could put your own spin on? Like,
It's
did that ever
interesting.
cross your mind?
Yeah, that's crossed my mind. Um, yeah, I do that in a way. On our website, we're starting to do that. That I offer playing certain pieces for if people want to sign up for a website or something like that. Um, and I play for people that are not doing well. Visit a couple I'm going to be seeing this week actually. Older couple, been always very supportive of me, and so they're not doing so well. So I'm going to go and play them a concert.
Beautiful.
In terms of recording anymore, playing, um, it takes a lot of practice. It
Mm,
takes a lot of work, and I guess I feel like doing other things now aside from just playing the clarinet. So this thing of writing a book, I never thought I was gonna write a book. I mean, the last English class I had was in high school, junior year in high school. So writing a book, I never thought I was gonna be writing a book. Now we're talking, I'm meeting, you and I'm just so excited. And tomorrow I'm Neil Haley. I don't know if you know who he is. 7 million views a week or something like that. Or,
amazing.
just um, and so stuff is happening, and I'm just thrilled to and grateful.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
No, not at all. Not at all. Well, let's get into the book. Okay. So you wrote a book, One Musician's Story of Grit and Glory from the Streets of New York to the Grand Stages of the World, from cab driver to Carnegie Hall. There's the book
Mhm.
right there. So I guess what, you retire in 2012 and you're like, I got so many stories, I'm gonna start
I
putting them together.
just talking, just over the years, talking with friends and at a party, and you have a drink, and then we just sort of let loose, and again talking about being in Calcutta or Tel Aviv or being the first American orchestra to be asked to perform in Hanoi and meeting General Diop, whatever his name was, who was the commander of the armies of North Vietnam, playing with Rudolf Serkin or Yo-Yo Ma or any of these people all over the world. Um,
Being hit on by Leonard
he
Bernstein.
hit off. I mean, so many, but there's so many stories.
Yeah.
And they said, you really should write a book.
Mhm.
So I did. I mean, that's basically the way where it is.
Well, I mean, how did you even like, how did you like, just for anyone that wants to get this, I mean, how do you even categorize chapters and figure out what to talk about? Because it seems like you've had such a wild career and
Yeah.
you've touched so many people's lives with your music. You've got to play with, you know, people who are world renowned, as you are as well. Like, I'm just curious, like, how did you decide which stories to put in and which stories to leave out?
Well, it started just as a kind of lark, as a game. I just started writing, and then I started putting things in a kind of a chronological order, and then I would go kind of by decade. And then I had a lot of mishmash, a lot of ideas, and then it became kind of like a puzzle, like a jigsaw puzzle,
Mm.
and I put things that would sort of fit after each, um, and that's what I would do. It starts around the late '50s, and into baseball. I'm listening to Vin Scully every night under the covers, and have a dog that sleeps in the backyard, and I hang out my bedroom window after my parents are asleep. Dee dee, dee dee, and he would come running around the house, and I would pick him up, and he would sleep with me, and I don't just different stories like that, and then going off to Europe and all of the things that happened, and so it's sort of the ups and downs, more up than down, and, it's been enjoyable. People have said that they enjoyed it. It's light, except where it's not. I was unfortunately, I had experienced, child abuse when I was a kid for over a period of years from my parents, unfortunately, and it was just so you experience something like that, and especially as a very young person, you don't understand. You figure, well, it must be me. I must have done something wrong, right? The parents can't be wrong,
Mhm.
and so it was tough. But I learned to just kind of go on and not allow things, disappointments, going out for an orchestra and being turned down. Not let it. I mean, it was sad, but then boom, you gotta keep going. You just gotta keep going, and so I did, and things really worked out very well for me.
Yeah. I can't think of two more cutthroat industries in the world than trying to be an actor or a musician.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah.
Can be really tough. Yeah,
What a journey though, huh?
yeah, it's
Y
been fun.
Yeah.
Well, look at you.
Yeah, when I look back, it's pretty tiring at some stages, but yeah, we had a good run.
It's interesting. There was a study. I don't know where it's from. Um, And it was the discussion about the study was that someone was on a surgical team, they were climbing a mountain, they played baseball,
Yep.
they were a musician, a percussion, played the drums in the New York Philharmonic, they did all kinds of stuff, and the profession that had the least margin of error is what do you think?
The climbing.
As a musician.
Yeah.
The least mar Of course, the consequences are different. When you miss as a musician on stage, you might not get hired again. That's why it's like life and death when you're out there, especially when you're in the beginning of your career.
Sure.
If you miss as a mountain climber, um, you could be dead, of course, right? Different consequences. But when you're out, believe me, it's like life and death when you're out there to play.
The toughest moments I've ever had, and I can't equate this to being similar to an audition for an orchestra or anything like that, but the hardest thing is, like most of the time when you go to climb to the summit of a mountain, you leave in the middle of the night, right? So
Wow.
because the weather in the afternoon is always a bit iffy. like up in the mountains. So if you're gonna get really good conditions with low wind and good sunlight,
It's better at night?
no, it's better first thing in the morning.
Oh,
But you have to but in order to get to the summit by early morning, you have to trek through the
oh,
night.
sure, of course.
So what ends up happening is like you'll get out of your tent and put on all your clothes at like midnight or 10 p.m. And then you'll trek through the night, climb through the night so that you can summit at 6 a.m. or 8 a.m. or 10 a.m. And then you have enough daylight to get back down, which is the real issue because getting coming down in the dark is really dangerous. Going up in the dark is less dangerous. And then of course you have that weather window where you have good weather in the morning and then the afternoon you can get storms and wind and stuff like that. But for me, climbing in the dark on ice is really rough because, like, it's fine if you're just walking up, and that's what most mountains are. You just walk it up, but there's some sections where you have like maybe 100 feet or 200 feet where you have to get ice axes and you've got the crampons on and you're roped in, and you're doing this at night with this like little light. You got to make sure every time you put your hammer in or your ice axe in that you're getting a good hold so that you can pull yourself up with that. And that for me is probably the most dangerous part of the whole trip, right?
Are you connected to the other people? What, by rope? Are you all connected?
So you're usually not connected to everyone because then if one person goes down, everyone goes down. So you're usually connected to your guide. So I was always connected to my like main guide. So it'd be the two of us. So if you're working with like if you're working with a good company or a good team, or you spend more money, then it's like 1-to-1 with you and a guide. And then if there's more,
But if you go down, he goes down.
yeah, that's the point though, because he's ready for you to go down because he's done this climb 100 times and whatever, right? So you have to have that trust. But if you're working in countries that don't have that kind of regulation or you're working with a bigger group, it might be two or three of you tied to one guide. And then of course you're also tied to two people who may or may not know what they're doing too, which is also a little bit sketchy. So I always preferred kind of being just with one guide. But those climbing up in the middle of the night on the way to the summit, those were always brutal.
Wow.
I can just imagine, that same sweat and nervousness of having to do an audition or something like that.
Well, the audition is one thing, but yeah, when you get a chance to perform with a great household word, the name, it can be nerve wracking, and it can be the end. It can be the beginning, can be the end.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know how much more time we have before we
We have as much
turn.
time as you want.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I just wanted to I'm supposed to say that my website is singerclarinet.com.
Yep.
So for any of you who wants to, we were just awarded a prize from the Literary Titan Gold Book Award, and we're doing pretty well. And so if you want to talk with me or find out what I'm doing or how the book is doing or read interesting stories that I'm writing about certain people in the book, um, go to singerclarinet.com and get the book. Amazon and Barnes and Noble are all the usual places.
Yeah. And I'll put the links and everything in the
Oh,
in the
thank you.
descriptions for the podcast. So that's no problem. It'll
Okay.
it'll be there.
And I'm not in a hurry. I'm not going anywhere.
It's amazing. Like I'm just wondering, like, was the book like a COVID project? Like, because we were all kind of like locked in
Yeah.
and what else are you gonna do other than reminisce about old days and write them down?
Yeah, that would have been good. Actually, my wife and I, we would take out food from restaurants, and then we would drive to PCH and find a place on the coast and park the car and have our dinner or whatever. Or I'd meet my daughter, and we'd get food, and we would park. I would go this way, and she would go this way, and we would sit in our cars, talking with each other from our cars.
Mhm.
Um, and so it was, yeah. No, it wasn't that. So this is 2025. I think that I started the book, geez, I don't know, I wanna say 2022, something like that, or so, so yeah, I don't know. My wife said, "Oh, you've been so busy for the last years and years and years," and maybe she's right, but specifically on the book, just the last couple of years, 2, 3 years. But then there's the promotion and on all this stuff going on, and agents in New York, and and it's fun. It's exciting, but my dogs. We have a couple of dogs and cats, and they're waiting for me to have time for them, and so got to do my children, our children.
Yeah, you gotta promote the book so you can spend more time with your animals. I totally get that. But how was the book writing process? Like, was it hard to get a publisher? Was it hard to get an agent? Like, because a lot of people out there love writing books and have lots of great stories to tell, and a lot of them are frustrated with the process. Maybe they're self-publishing or and whatever like that. I'm just curious, like,
That's what I did, but the thing is that I had a good editor and, Lisa Fabre, who, is a very inspiring person. She's she's recovering. I mean, she's, in remission from cancer, and she's a big inspiration. She was a wonderful, editor. Um, Once it was out, started getting reviews. Kirkus, reviewed the book pretty well, and from that, I got a couple of agents who were interested in my book and me from New York, and, so I'm just it's been really busy with doing podcasts. It just started,
mhm.
and, there's like 15 of them coming up in the next, several weeks, and so it just people are interested in, talking about it, and I'm grateful to share my life with them.
Well, I mean, it's such an interesting life to share. I
Oh,
mean, that's
thank
the beauty of it, right?
you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because like, we all like that's why podcasts I think are such a great platform
yeah.
because, if this was like I've done a bunch of television interviews, like if we were on TV, like you would have gotten 45 seconds and then we would have flipped to something else.
Right.
Like I've done tons of that. Like, oh, I made a new set a Guinness World Record riding a motorcycle across China. Here's your 10 seconds to tell us how.
Yeah.
But then you get to talk for an hour and a half, you get to learn about someone.
It's just like talking with a friend,
Yeah,
with a good friend.
and there's no bullshit, like,
Yeah.
you cannot hide on a podcast, like, we're all gonna learn about you, we're all gonna like, there's no flashy graphics to hide behind,
Right.
it's just 2 people having a chat, and you either like both of them when you're done or you don't.
That's right. This is a little different, I'm told, because most musicians' biographies or autobiographies or memoirs, whatever, are about victories. It's about, well, I went to this school and then I got into this quartet or I entered this competition and I won and then I did this and I won. And this is more about losing things
That's way better.
and well, it was who I was, and this is people said, "Well, what demographic are you after?" And I said, I this is my life story. I'm not thinking about a demographic."
I'm after truth.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, this was, yeah, and so there were great highs, and there were some lows too that you get past, and, you don't.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's your choice in a way. It's not I don't mean to sound flippant about it, but it's,
No, but no one sorry to interrupt you, no one wants to read just highlight after highlight after
well,
highlight.
that's it.
Yeah, because people are people, and people have problems, and people suffer.
Right,
So, like, let's really learn about you and not just
right,
not just skim the highlights.
right,
Like, everyone's had tough times. People get divorced, people hit rock bottom,
right,
people rebound,
right.
and the rebound is the story, not the rock bottom.
Well, I think so
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
So that's why I haven't been, and I had to hide it for so long. I couldn't tell people I was driving a cab. I couldn't tell them that I show up at noon, and then maybe by 5 o'clock, after standing around, maybe I get a cab, but maybe I don't,
Yeah.
because it depending on how much money I brought in the night before.
Mhm.
You know, so and then we're at rehearsal, and we're doing a tour, and I've got a lot to play, and nobody wanted to stay next to me in the hotel because I was practicing all the time, trying to catch up with my colleagues, and they were playing a lot, and I wasn't. I was playing, other groups, but not nearly as much. But I was doing these other things to make a living,
Mhm.
and so always trying to make it in academia as a professor and make it as a performer, and it was not so easy either.
You're juggling a lot of balls in the air, like, that's gotta
Being a
be.
good dad,
Yeah.
being a decent husband, it's,
Being a good person?
that wasn't I mean, being a good person, yeah,
Yeah.
right. Yeah,
It's hard, right?
it's hard, really hard. Yeah.
It's such a journey, like, all of us are on just such unique journeys, and we all have great stories to tell.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Well, look, thank you very much for coming by. So, for those of you who want From Cab Driver to Carnegie Hall by David Singer, I will put his website and everything like that on the bottom in the descriptions. And yeah, man, I wish you the best of luck. This is
Thank
exciting. I'm so glad we finally made it happen.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
And now we go up here to the big one, the wide one, where we can see you.
Stand up.
Yeah, no, we don't have to stand up, but it's great to meet you. Thanks for coming and doing this face to face. I think it's always better,
An
and
honor.
yeah,
I admire you in your life and what you're doing and
yeah.
how exciting it is.
Thank you,
Look forward to following you in the future.
and come back anytime.
Oh, thank
Like
you.
we don't have to talk about music. Like we can just sit down and talk about whatever's on our minds because it's good. You're great. You're a great conversationalist. So anytime you want to swing by, just yeah, you're around here, so swing by anytime if you want.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
All right. Thank you. And we're out.